What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. The NFL is back. What a first game that we had, Tampa Bay versus Dallas, in what was everything that you could have possibly wanted out of a football game in its very first game back. And it's just why the NFL is so amazing. You had this amazing performance by Dak Prescott coming back from injury. You had Tom Brady being Tom Brady. You had last second field goal. You had missed extra points, amazing punts, turnovers at key moments, Hail Marys that were intercepted, almost returned for touchdowns. Like, there was literally everything in this game, and it was just beyond fantastic. And the Buccaneers end up winning a football game. I forget the statistic. I meant to write it down, but it was, I think they allowed 450 yards. They lost the turnover battle by 3, and they had over 100 yards in penalties. I believe those were the 3 things that no team has ever won in that scenario before until Tampa Bay beat Dallas with that same scenario. Again, Dallas had over 450 total yards. They had Dallas had +3 in the turnover margin, and Tampa Bay had over 100 yards in penalties, and Dallas somehow could not find a way still to close that game. They certainly had their own issues, missed field goal, missed extra point. Certainly in a game that close, those things will definitely hurt you. They had some opportunities to punch the ball in the end zone, and Mike McCarthy decided to go for some field goals. He tried a 60-yard field goal attempt before. Like, this game had everything. This is what makes football and the NFL so incredibly amazing. Of course, drama at the end, some controversy at the end with the OPI, or what maybe could have been OPI. Let's talk about that, right? Because I know there was a lot of people talking about this. Obviously, once the no call was made, and it's a big play by Chris Godwin, which sets the Buccaneers up for the game-winning field goal. Of course, Tampa Bay just runs 3 plays and throws the ball out of bounds on all 3 plays, just to kind of run the clock down a little bit after that. But to me, and I very much know I'm in the minority here, let me start by saying I could, if they called the penalty, I wouldn't have had an issue with it. I can definitely see how this could go both ways. How I watched it is he definitely extends his forearm, right? You extend your forearm, you have the right to call a penalty in that play. And I think by now we are very much aware that offensive players much less often are going to get called for any sort of pass interference than defensive players. It just doesn't get called all that often. It gets called even less in very tight situations where the game is on the line. How I saw this, and I thought Chris Collinsworth did a tremendous job of this, is if you watch it and you go back, he definitely extends his arm, right? But if you watch it, the corner's already off balance. Like, yeah, he's going into it, and that's certainly not helping the situation. And again, definitely could probably be called, but he goes back with his head almost as to sell it. And when I watched it, yeah, again, I think it definitely could have gone either way, but especially when I watched it on replay, I can understand why there's no penalty. I don't think there's this big, conspiracy. And yes, of course, Tom Brady gets another call in his favor. That just seems to be the case, from more often than not. I get that. But as I watched it as a bang play, and as I watched it back in replay, I can understand the no call. And I think if we're being honest and if we're being fair, if that was a back shoulder throw from Aaron Rodgers to Davante Adams, and Davante Adams used his forearm while the other guy was already falling backwards, stopped on a dime, caught it back shoulder, and caught a big play, I think if they call an OPI there and the Packers are moved back and they're no longer in field goal position and they lose the game because of that, I think Packer fans would be beyond livid. I think they would lose their freaking minds if that were called OPI and that was Rodgers and Adams and not Tom Brady and Chris Godwin. But again, of course, I understand that these calls seem to go in favor of the one and only Tom Brady a little bit more than often. But listen, either way, however you view that play, it was a phenomenal game. 2 teams that I thought played, there was definitely mistakes, right? This had the feel of a week 1 game without much, without the majority of these players playing much preseason. You could see some of the mistakes, the penalties, the turnovers. Like, it just wasn't perfect football, but man, was it fun football. And I want to talk a little bit. Let's talk about Dak first. Like, you didn't see him running around quite as much. You saw him run a little bit, but not quite as much. Didn't seem to have the exact same mobility that he had in years past. It also didn't seem like he had the high end arm strength that he had in seasons past. So whether that's just, kind of getting his arm back in shape after taking a season off, whether that's because he can't put as much weight still on, whether it's his ankle or whatever, that he needs that full torque from. And he still played phenomenal, right? So even the interception that he threw went right off CeeDee Lamb's hands. There were a couple other drops in this game. I thought Dak played brilliant football, and especially not being as mobile as he's used to being, not having the strong, arm that he's used to having, and having to go out and just put pinpoint pass after pinpoint pass, especially against a Tampa Bay defense whose defensive line continued to get pressure and force holding penalties and all those sort of things. They didn't even pretend to run the ball, and Dak was up to the challenge. I thought that was a phenomenal game from Dak. And then Brady on the other side certainly would like to have a couple throws back, but what he's doing at age 44, and I tweeted out after, I thought that last drive by Tom Brady was a masterclass in QBing in that sort of situation. Now, people love to point out the OPI. The OPI is not Tom Brady's fault. Even if it is OPI, he put that ball exactly where it needed to be for Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin when he let go of that ball, he doesn't know that Chris Godwin, even if if you deem it to be a push off and a penalty, he doesn't know that Chris Godwin's going to do that. He threw that ball in the perfect spot. Chris Godwin pushed off to get open, but you go through that. Now, a lot of this is it begins with a screen pass, but it was a play that Brady checked out of. Then you had the deflection by Diggs. Then you had the Bernard where he put a perfect placement on a check down for a first down. They had the false start penalty, and now you're a little bit behind the 8 ball. You're behind the chains for, I think it was 1st and 15 at that point. No more timeouts left, under a minute. No panic whatsoever. He gets the Gronk check down for 6. Gronk gets out of bounds. Then Gronk gets that big play to the Cowboys 42. And then they had the play where Antonio Brown and Tom Brady weren't on the same page, and Brady just threw it long and it was incomplete. And then on the very next play was the play to Chris Godwin. The throws in and of themselves, whatever, right? I thought the throw to Godwin was really good. I thought the throw to Gronk over the middle was very good, but that's not what I meant when I say that it was a masterclass in quarterbacking. Go back and watch Tom Brady on that drive. You would have no idea that it was like anything besides a 7-on-7 in practice in May in an OTA. You would have no idea the amount of calm and poise, and he's just completely unbothered in that situation. There's no rush. It's a hurry up offense. No rush or panic from Tom Brady at all. Just go through your progressions, go through your reads, get to your checkdowns if you need to, complete the pass. Even when they got to no timeouts, like I get the dislike for Brady and anytime a player runs roughshod over a league for 2 decades, it's not always the most fun thing in the world to cheer for them. I'm not saying you have to cheer for the guy. I'm simply not, but man, some of the stuff that he does, and even more so at his age, is just beyond incredible. And again, I think if you go back and you watch that sequence of just how calm and poised he was, it was a beautiful 2-minute drill. And that's why Tom Brady is so good in those situations, because again, you watch him and you would have no idea it wasn't like just a 7-on-7 in a mini camp or an OTA. Big drive for Brady, leads him down, get the field goal, maybe the assist from the ref if you want to view it as that. But either way, I thought this was a really well-played game. I thought the 2 quarterbacks were fantastic. Couple throws that they'd like to have back, but entertaining nonetheless. That brings me to Mike McCarthy, and I tweeted this out after the game. Mike McCarthy's last 40 games now, he is 13-26-1. Double the amount of losses than he has wins in his last 40 games. Now, I immediately pointed out, of course, that a lot of those starts were Brett Hundley and Andy Dalton and Ben DiNucci. It's not like he had 40 starts with Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott. However, he did have his last 19 games with those 2 players, Aaron Rodgers or Dak Prescott. He is 6-12-1. In his last 19 games with either Aaron Rodgers or Dak Prescott at quarterback, he's won 6 of the 19 games. And once again, has double the amount of losses than he has wins. I still think that Mike McCarthy is a good football coach. Well, I think he was a good football coach for a long time in Green Bay. It was definitely time over those last couple seasons, and Green Bay made 1,000,000% the right move to move on. I think it's to be determined to see what happens with Mike McCarthy in Dallas. I think last year was unfair with basically no Dak the entirety of the season. Their offensive line was in shambles. I thought they put on a heck of a performance and gave Tampa Bay really everything that they could handle. And Dallas had every right to win that game. I think if their field goal kicking is a little bit better, if their red zone efficiency is a little bit better, they probably win that game. And they were right there with the defending Super Bowl champs in a game where almost nobody was giving Dallas much of a chance to win. They had every right to win it. So we'll see what happens with McCarthy and this Cowboys team moving forward. Based on the way they play, if they can continue to play like that and Dak can continue to play like that, I think to me they immediately jump to the favorites in the NFC East. But again, Mike McCarthy, not exactly a great record over his last 40 games or his last 19 games with Dak Prescott or Aaron Rodgers. Let's go to some Packers specific news. We're about 11 minutes in here. Suppose we could talk about some Packers. So Green Bay did announce their captains on Thursday. So we've got Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Mercedes Lewis, Jair Alexander, Kenny Clark, Adrian Amos, and Mason Crosby. The first thing is that instead of 3 captains, they go to 7. So 4 additional captains. Last year and the last 2 years, it was 1 on offense, 1 on defense, 1 on special teams. So now there's 3 on offense, 3 on defense, 1 on special teams. So 7 out of 53 players are now captains. So a little more than 1 out of 7 are captains, or I guess a little less, whatever, however you want to view it. But yeah, so there's a lot of captains on the team, first of all, but I think what everyone was looking at was no Zadarius Smith. Now, in and of itself, in a vacuum, if you just say, no Zadarius Smith, well, who are you going to take off? Are you going to take Jair off? Are you going to take Kenny Clark off? Are you going to take Adrian Amos off, right? Those are 3 very good picks as defensive captains. You can't make it and if Zadarius Smith was on and Kenny Clark wasn't, you would probably be saying, where's Kenny Clark? If he was on and Adrian Amos wasn't, you'd say, well, where's Amos? Where's Jair? One of those guys wasn't going to be on. But it is noteworthy that it is Zadarius Smith. And the reason that I say that is the last 2 seasons, the lone defensive captain for the Packers was Zadarius Smith. And he definitely seems to be that sort of leader within the locker room and just his presence and all of that. So it's interesting, right? Now, there were a lot of, from what Matt LaFleur was saying in his press conference the other day, it sounds like a lot of players got votes. I'm sure Zadarius still got votes, but it's interesting. And we've had this really weird offseason with Zadarius Smith where he said he wanted to be a Packer for life. He didn't get that with a new contract extension. It sounds like there were some contract concerns. He has this mysterious back injury, which at the beginning, there seemed to definitely be something in the ether of is this really a back injury or is this more of a contract sort of thing? But we're now definitely at the point where it definitely seems like this is a legit back injury, but still, interesting nonetheless. And then not being voted team captain, there's a major out in his contract next year for Green Bay in a year where they don't have really any cap room. It smells like everything just smells a degree off, right? I have no inside information. I have nothing to say that anything's wrong. It could just be that, Z had a back injury. He wanted a bigger contract, which who didn't, who doesn't? They moved on. He's happy. The back just flared up a little bit, so sat out of practice. And, maybe he even said I'm taking more of a back seat and it's Kenny and Jair and Adrian Amos' time to be captain. Who knows, right? We don't know the inner workings, but the whole offseason for Z has been very interesting, and we'll see, does he play this week? He's still it looks like he's going to be questionable on the injury report, still limited in practice. And then, how effective is he this season? It's a huge season for him because, again, he's a free agent because either Green Bay is going to have to rework his deal, which he's going to have to be a part of, or Green Bay is going to have to release him, at which point he does become a free agent. So the better he plays, the more money that's going to be coming his way. So I think this is a very interesting season for Zadarius Smith. On the flip side, we have the injury report. So besides the captains, we have the injury report. We've got Tyler Lancaster, who's limited. We had Mercedes Lewis, who had the day off. Vernon Scott, who did not practice. It looks like he will not play this week. Preston Smith did not practice. Apparently, he had a head laceration that is not serious. And then Z, of course, was limited once again. But for the Saints, very interesting. Ken Crowley and Traquan Smith both did not practice. Now, Ken Crowley, probably a starter right now for them in their defensive back or in their cornerback group. They do not have a deep cornerback group right now. And then, oh, by the way, Marshawn Lattimore, their 1A corner, their alpha corner, was limited with some knee soreness or a knee injury of some sort. So their secondary is massively banged up. It's Lattimore is their 1. Crawley is likely their 2. You have Paulson Adebo, their 3rd-round pick, which if he has to play a ton, Aaron Rodgers is going to be licking his chops. Desmond Trufant, they just signed recently, so he's still getting to know the defense. He really struggled a season ago in Detroit, and Green Bay had success throwing at him against Detroit. That's all they have on their roster. And if they need to call somebody up from the practice squad, guess who's up? Kadar Hallman. Definitely don't think Green Bay is going to mind that too much. Kavarier Russell, if you remember, he was on the practice squad and was called up for the playoffs a season ago as a special teams player for the Packers. And then they've got Dylan Mabin and Jordan Miller. Just not a very deep secondary. You might be saying, Andy, they just traded for Bradley Roby. He's suspended for week 1, so he will not be playing this week against Green Bay. So yeah, the Saints defensive backfield not in a great spot, especially at that cornerback position right now. Very quickly, the one last thing I wanted to go over is that star position. So Jerry Gray on Wednesday talked about how there's 3 potential players who could play star: Shannon Sullivan, Jair Alexander, or Darnell Savage. Personally, I would be very surprised if that ends up being Darnell Savage. The reason being, Adrian Amos has got a ton of reps in that nickel dime linebacker / safety role. And with that, it means Darnell Savage and Henry Black are the safeties behind that. Now, if you still want to play Amos there, and if you put Savage in the slot or in that star position, now all of a sudden you've got Henry Black, and you probably need to pull up Innis Gaines to play that other safety spot. So I don't think there's much of a chance that it's going to be Darnell Savage. You never know. We'll wait and see what happens. But at least this week, and especially, I don't even think just this week, but with Vernon Scott out, that definitely doesn't help things either. But I don't think that they're going to have Amos in the box and Savage in the star, and then 2 less proven and experienced safeties holding up on the back end. I just don't see that. So to me, this is going to be Chandon or Jair. I think it's going to primarily be Chandon. I do think there's going to be some times where we see Jair in the slot alongside, Eric Stokes and Kevin King on the outside, but I still expect this to be Chandon Sullivan, and that's who's got almost every rep in the slot and in that star position through almost the entirety of camp so far. So we'll see what happens, and I definitely think that they could go in a couple different directions, but fully expecting Chandon Sullivan to be that guy in the star position. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. I greatly appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.